Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Robbie Berg, a hurricane specialist here at the National Hurricane Center. Back with our next stop along our virtual NHC tour. It's now 12:30 in the afternoon here, Eastern Time. I grabbed a little bit of lunch, took a little bit of break. But we're now back. We're currently located in the CARCAH unit, which stands for Chief Aerial Reconnaissance Coordination All Hurricanes. And we have Warren Madden here who's going to kind of lead us through what goes on in this unit. They're an important unit because when we're out in the Hurricane Specialist unit trying to come up with a forecast for a storm, we have to know how strong the storm is initially, how big it is, where it's moving, and CARCAH is an integral part of helping us to determine those aspects of the storm. So Warren, take it away. Let us know kind of what you do in this part of the Hurricane Center.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to CARCAH. And Robbie did get the acronym right, Chief Aerial Reconnaissance Coordination, All Hurricanes. You say it enough, it kind of rolls off the tongue after a while. And unlike the rest of the building, which is Department of Commerce, our office here is actually a Department of Defense office. I'm a civilian employee of the Air Force. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, and I used to fly with the Hurricane Hunters. Flew from 1998 to 2012 when I retired. And the only reason I retired was because I aged out. I got too old, and they said, okay, time for you to move on. So now I work behind the scenes, coordinating everything between the Hurricane Hunters that are flying into the storm and the Hurricane Center that we get all the information to. So we have two main assets at our disposal. The first is our 10 WC-130J aircraft of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. They're my old unit, Air Force Reserve Squadron, based at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and they're our main asset for going out and doing reconnaissance on the storm, finding out where it is, how strong it is, where it's going. Our other asset are the aircraft of the Air Operations Center of NOAA. They're based at Lakeland, Florida. We have two P-3 Orions and a Gulfstream, and the P-3's main mission is more science-oriented. And they're seeing a picture of the P-3, and they go into the storm to find out what makes it tick, to discover new things about the storms, to improve forecasting techniques, computer models, test out new instruments. And then the Gulfstream doesn't fly through the storm, it actually flies around the storm and ahead of the storm, and it drops a lot of instruments out called dropsondes. And these instruments gather data from the level the plane is flying, which in the Gulfstream's case is 45,000 feet or so. And here, I'll show you one of those dropsondes. So this is a dropsonde, and this is an instrument that we fire out the bottom of the aircraft. There's a sensor on the bottom that records temperature, humidity, and pressure. And then there's also a GPS receiver in here. So a little parachute pops out, and as it's floating down, it's figuring out where it is and calling back to the plane, and from that we can get wind speed and direction. So these are very valuable because while the planes are collecting information from their instruments when they're flying along, and in the case of the P-3s and the WCs, it's 10,000 feet, we still need to know what's going on beneath the planes. And so this is one of our main ways of gathering that information. And then there's also another instrument on the planes called the Step Frequency Microwave Radiometer, which stares down at the surface of the ocean and looks at the microwaves bouncing back from them. And as those microwaves are being scattered about by the surface, being churned up by the winds, some very complicated mathematics can actually get a pretty good estimate of surface wind speed from that. And the forecasters love that because, of course, that surface wind speed, that's what's going to affect people and property. So every morning during hurricane season, which of course started today, and sometimes even before, like we were dealing with Alberto last week, every morning we go across the hall to the forecasters and we say, okay, what are your reconnaissance needs for the day? Let me put this back up so I can talk with my hands. And many days they'll just say, we're good. And so a lot of people will ask, well, what do you do then? Well, we train. We maintain. As you might imagine, flying through a hurricane is not the easiest task in the world, and it's not necessarily the safest task, although we do everything we can to reduce the risk to as little as possible. So part of that program of reducing the risk is making sure that we train incessantly to make sure that we all work together well as a crew and the planes are maintained at the highest state possible. But then there are mornings we go across the hall, like just the other week, and they'll say, we need you to go out and either go into an existing system, or maybe there's a suspicious area of cloudy weather that the forecasters think something might be forming there, and they need us to go out and fly at very low levels, like 1,000 feet above the surface of the ocean, to see if there's that surface circulation. So then we come back and we say, okay, we call up the squadrons and we say, here's what our taskings are from the forecasters for the day. And we arrange for the planes to go out, and it's usually a day in advance because it takes a little while to plan these missions. And when the planes go out and they're flying through the storms, all of that information is flowing back into this office here at CARCAH, and our primary responsibility then is first and foremost quality control. We want to make sure the data makes sense and looks good in terms of the overall meteorological picture, and then also prioritization. There's a lot of information that comes in. And some of it is more important than others from the forecaster's perspective in terms of their timeline. Because, of course, when they're in forecast mode, they're having to put out those advisories every 6 hours, or in some cases every 3 hours. And so there's information they need right then and there as they're writing that advisory, because it might make all the difference between saying this is a Cat 1 storm, or maybe it's increased to a Cat 2, or, hey, maybe as much as a Cat 5. So they rely on the information of the hurricane hunters to be able to make those fine tunings to the forecast strength and direction. And people will ask, why do we still send people, men and women, into storms? Don't we have satellites? Don't we have all of these other remote sensing? And we do, and we use them. But there's a difference. There's some information you can only get by getting inside the belly of the beast. Take, for example, you go to the doctor's office, and the doctor does a chest x-ray on you. Hey, that's great. That's like a satellite picture. Good information. And I hope this never happens, but it may happen. The doctor looks at your x-ray and says, I don't like that spot right there. That looks a little funny. I need a biopsy of that. Well, hurricane hunter flights are like the Weather Service's biopsies. We're going inside the storm to collect that exact information about its strength, where it's going, how strong the winds are, how low the pressure is, and that's the key information that the forecasters need to really nail in those advisories and make sure that people are informed about what's going on with the storms, so that then downstream the evacuations orders can be issued properly by the emergency managers. And then the key point is that people trust the forecast and get out when they need to get out, and also protect their property.
Yeah, that's great, Warren. And I was just looking at this map you have on the wall over here, and maybe you can explain that we don't fly the planes everywhere across the Atlantic Ocean. There's only a certain range they can actually get.
Sure. Yeah, our typical missions will last anywhere from 8 to 10 hours, and our max endurance is about 12 or 13 hours. We're not air refuelable, and so the aircraft are based. The Air Force Squadron is based in Mississippi, and the NOAA Squadron is based in Florida, but our area of responsibility actually covers a very wide area, all the way from well to the east of the Leeward and Windward Islands, out to about 52.5 west longitude, and then actually our responsibility even extends west of this map all the way to Hawaii. So we have a series of forward operating locations that we can deploy the aircraft to make sure that they are in range in order to be able to reach the storm where it needs to be flown. And in order to do that, we of course work with the forecasters when we see where these things are brewing up and where they're going, to get the aircraft deployed well in advance so the crews can be prepared and rested and ready to launch out onto missions when the forecasters need them to do so.
Great. Warren, that's great information. We're so lucky to have you guys here at the Hurricane Center, just a step away from the actual operations area, because it really helps us out. We're trying to understand more about the storm. So thanks for your time.
No problem.
Hopefully everybody online got some good information from that. This is a great place here in CARCAH, and we welcome you, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
No problem at all. Thanks for being with us.
Okay.